Hi guys, and welcome to Freckle Finance. You'll notice a background that you're not used to because I am currently at my in-laws' house. I am filming during the point of we have moved out of Toronto before we moved to California. And today I thought I'd sit down with you and do the cost of living comparison video and how we use cost of living as part of our decision and what factors we took into consideration for cost of living. So for us, there were several different cities that we did have to do cost of living comparisons for, and one of them was a city that's about an hour outside of Toronto. The other one was Seattle, New York City, and then Northern California, which is the one we ultimately chose. I do want to state that cost of living was not the sole reason we chose Northern California, but you do want to make sure that when you're deciding to move somewhere that you can afford to go there. I can't express the number of times I've seen comments on sites for finances or other related things where someone's saying, I moved to this city and I cannot afford to live here because although the wages might be higher, it does not support them to be able to survive even at the same lifestyle that they had. So that definitely needs to be taken into consideration, but should not necessarily be the sole reason. Well, this video is going to go over the factors that we decided were important for cost of living. For every individual person and family, this is going to be different because what's important to your family may not be important to mine and vice versa. So I went into a lot of detail figuring out budgets for each individual location, and I went into a ton of detail, which is what I recommend you do. I don't think you should base numbers off of your current location, but off the location you're moving to. And this meant we went into as much detail as looking up insurance quotes for the individual areas. Started this process before any offers were received. Now this means later on you can plug in the actual income that you will be making. However, it's a good idea to have an idea before you even go into the interview and just early on in the process, so when you do find out the wage, if it's higher or lower, you can start adjusting accordingly, but it's not going to take nearly as much time. If you get a much lower offer than expected, you might know right away that city is not an option for you as it just won't work for your family. One of the advantages that we did have is we do have friends that lived in most of the areas who were able to help us and tell us what expenses there are there that we don't have in Toronto, so that can be added into the budget, because it's really hard to know otherwise without doing a lot of research to figure out what expenses, and they might just be small, that they do have that you don't have in your city. In every single location, I tried to figure out the cost of owning a home and renting a home. So I had kind of two separate budgets. Based on those, I wanted to see how realistic it was for us to own a home, because if we decide that owning a home is very, very important to us, we need to take that into consideration. And actually it ended up wiping out two cities because we really couldn't afford to buy a home, and we did ultimately decide that we would really like that option. And when I say the cost of owning a home, I mean I looked up everything. I looked up types of mortgages in the area and the ones we would likely take, what the interest rates were for those mortgages, property taxes, insurance rates, maintenance, like every single cost, if they have trash as a cost, which is something that we don't have in Toronto, all those types of things, every single cost that we could possibly have for owning the home, we took that into consideration. And a very important part to looking up the cost of home ownership is we did go on Zillow, we did look up house prices. Within a 30-minute commute, we had kind of a standard of what we would like in a home, although we were willing to sacrifice some things because, you know, houses can be very expensive and you usually can't get the house that you want. And so one thing that we're not used to is having to look up safe areas, because everywhere we've lived, we've always known the safe areas, as well as good school districts, which is not usually an issue within Canada. So we had to look up all of that stuff before deciding if we could afford a house in those areas. Since we're planning to upgrade a bit and purchase a car, I looked up the cost of car ownership in every area. So that didn't vary much because generally the price of purchasing the car doesn't fluctuate a lot, and we'd probably just keep our purchase price the same, and it may get us a better or a less better car depending. But interest rates do vary a bit. And you have to take into consideration, like New York has winter, so you would need a little more maintenance on your car for winter related things. So we did take that into consideration. However, in New York City, we would not have bought a car anyway, so it really was completely off the list. And since we plan on buying a car cash, I actually took the price of the car and amortized that over 5 years to give it a monthly fee. Since we're moving away from pretty much everything we know, it was important to us that we are able to come back to Canada every year. And what we decided on is we wanted to do twice a year. This is just based on the fact that my husband's going to be getting 4 weeks of vacation, and so coming back twice makes sense, and then we still have another week for vacation. So like 2 weeks in December and then 1 week at another time. So I looked up the price of flights from every area, the cost to rent the car, the cost of expenses that we're gonna have when we do come here other than renting a car, and just entertainment and stuff like that, because it is gonna be like a mini vacation. And I took all of that into consideration and added it into these cost of living budgets. Something that we're not used to is paying for health insurance. So every company, when we did receive offers, had different types of packages and different amounts that they paid. So we did take that into consideration, although there wasn't a huge variation in the amount of health insurance we would end up paying. But I actually had to do a ton of research. I am not at all used to the healthcare system in the US, and apparently a lot of people, even living in the US for a long time, do not fully understand. But I did make sure that not only the category of health insurance for our monthly payment, but also our small amounts that we have to pay when something comes up. So I made sure that we put that in the budget as well. I also made sure that any other small items that we have in our current budget, such as Netflix, were added into this budget to make sure that it works, or to consider that if we had to get rid of a small subscription or something like that, which we fortunately do not have to. And as the last category of items I added into the budget for the cost of living comparisons, I made sure to put the maximum amount that we possibly could for employer match, depending on how the companies did it. So I had to compare each individual company, how they did their employer. Some of them weren't necessarily employer match at 50% or anything like that, so they all did it differently. I put the maximum amount because that is free money that you can't get any other way, and I wanted to make sure that our budgets worked with everything else and the employer matching. As a Canadian that's going to be living in the US, we also had to figure out what our net salaries are actually going to be in those locations. So of course we have to pay taxes to the US government and to the California government, but we also have to pay taxes to Canada, at least for now, as we are deemed a Canadian resident. So I did have to make sure to include what I estimate we will have to pay to Canadian taxes into our budget, because we still have to pay more taxes back to Canada. As, believe it or not, because everyone says California taxes are expensive, Canadian taxes are still even more. I did that by using both a Canadian and American net income tax calculator, and I also had to translate between Canadian and US dollars to make sure that I was getting the most accurate numbers that I could. Hopefully my budget is accurate, and when we go to California we don't have too many hiccups with the budget. I did do the maximum that I felt comfortable with for both renting and owning a home, so hopefully if anything those are just lower instead of higher. After the job offers came in, which he did not get a job offer in every single location, we did input the net income that we would receive after paying Canadian taxes into each individual location, and that helped us really decide, and as I said earlier, exclude some of the locations because we just would not be able to afford a house in the distance that he would like to be from work. He was also very interested in the job he ended up picking anyways, so the location won and so did the job. So I hope this ended up being a great decision that we made. I do also want to say that once we did pick Northern California, we also did a separate analysis on whether owning or renting over the 5 years made more sense. And when I mean made more sense, I mean what made our net worth the most at the end of 5 years. If you would like me to do a video showing and explaining how I came up with this calculation and comparison, let me know in the comments down below. At this point, this video is getting too long and I do not want to include it. So I hope you really liked this video on how we compared the cost of living in several locations. And if you have any other questions, or there's anything I missed, any questions regarding more cost of living comparisons and such like that, leave a comment down below. I will get back to you on it. And if you're new to this channel, make sure you click that subscribe button below and give a thumbs up for moving to California. And remember, no matter what your financial situation is, make sure to have a great day. Bye.